the United States of America is facing an emergency tonight. And no, it is not the emergency of the clock ticking to midnight without legislated funding for the American government. We've seen that clock tick to midnight before on nights like this. The emergency the United States of America is facing tonight is an emergency the United States of America has created for the world. And that emergency is that the President of the United States, in his public appearance today, proved that he is mentally incapable and emotionally incapable of fulfilling his constitutional duties as President of the United States. In other words, there is no President of the United States as we knew it. There is no functioning intelligence, no functioning judgment mechanism within the mind of the current holder of the title, President of the United States. And that person is also the holder of the nuclear codes that could destroy the planet in seconds. And he is, much to the horror of the commanding officers of the American military who listened to him today, the commander-in-chief of the most powerful military in the history of the world. Much of the news media made the mistake of believing that all of the American commanding generals and admirals were being summoned to Quantico, Virginia to listen to the small man of small experience who is currently the Secretary of Defense. That was obviously a fraudulent reason for demanding that all the generals and admirals fly from all over the world, leaving their command posts, to listen to a speech. It was obviously always just a setup for Donald Trump to harangue that audience with what turned out to be stream of consciousness madness, complete with hallucinations and an endless stream of pathological lies. A group of officers who earned their jobs in ways that Donald Trump never could, had to sit there and listen to a clown who stood before them in what appears to be a homemade brew of orange makeup slathered all over his face because he thinks it makes him look better. And I guess maybe we should accept Donald Trump's judgment about that one thing, that the madman orange makeup he slathers on himself makes him look better. Maybe it does. We don't know. Maybe the actual sight of the actual color of his 79-year-old skin is much worse than the orange clown confection that he chooses, but we don't know. Or maybe the orange junk on his face is yet another proof that the man has no capacity to make a judgment about anything, including the way he looks, never mind nuclear weapons. What was he thinking backstage when his Secretary of Defense, who had to promise to stop drinking to get confirmed by the Senate, insulted all of the commanding officers in the room with this kind of idiocy?
It's completely unacceptable to see fat generals and admirals in the halls of the Pentagon and leading commands around the country and the world. It's a bad look. It is bad, and it's not who we are.
Okay, Pete, how about fat presidents? How about a president who has been fat every day of his political career? Is that a bad look? All of those generals can button their uniform jackets. All of those admirals can, every one of them. So there's the Secretary of Defense, who may or may not be managing his reported drinking problem, telling all of those commanding officers that they better never look as bad as Donald Trump, who can't even button his suit coat jacket. There was some suspense in the room today when Donald Trump was giving his speech. There was no suspense about would he cross the line that you never cross with the military as president and get political. Everyone knew he was going to do that. Everyone knew that he doesn't know there's a line. Everyone knew he was going to foolishly waste the admirals and generals' time telling them about how many swing states he wanted. And of course he did. The suspense in the room was whether the very, very tired, almost sleepy 79-year-old man at the microphone was going to make it through that 1 hour and 11-minute speech. And there were times in the middle of a sentence that it would seem like he just might drop right there, might not even finish that sentence. And what he seemed to be showing to the generals and the world is that he might not have the physical strength to make it through the 3 years, 3 months, and 20 days left of his presidency. Is that what has given J.D. Vance such a spring in his step lately? Is that why the vice president looks so happy these days? Donald Trump has never looked physically weaker or wearier than he did today. Weaker in every sense of that word, physically, mentally. Because Donald Trump is uneducable. He still doesn't understand why he walked into a room of military commanders today and faced silence.
Thank you very much, Pete. Great job you're doing, too. Fantastic job. I've never walked into a room so silent before. This is very... Don't laugh. Don't laugh. You're not allowed to do that. You know what? Just have a good time. And if you want to applaud, you applaud. And if you want to do anything
For Republicans, the current trajectory raises concern.
Of course, there goes your rank. There goes your future. But you just feel nice and loose, okay, because we're all on the same team. And I was told that, sir, you won't hear a murmur in the room. I said, we got to loosen these guys up a little bit. So you just have a good time.
He didn't loosen them up. They didn't have a good time. They didn't applaud. Politely applauded only at the end. Donald Trump lied to the commanders repeatedly, and they knew it. He told them Ukraine is the worst war since World War II. Everyone sitting in that room knows that the war Donald Trump avoided by getting a doctor's excuse, the Vietnam War, which in Vietnam is correctly called the American War, killed over 4 million people. It was in what was then South Vietnam, North Vietnam, and as the United States spread the war into Cambodia and Laos, the war across those borders was much worse than what you're seeing in Ukraine. And he insulted the commanders with his lies about war. He told them that Portland, Oregon, quote, looks like a war zone, spoken by someone who has no idea what a war zone looks like. Everyone in his audience knows what a war zone looks like. Everyone in his audience today knew that Donald Trump was lying. Donald Trump was telling the kind of lie that should concern his doctors and his family when he said Portland looks like a war zone. He hallucinated dialogue that has never happened. And his 79-year-old brain cells couldn't find words that were right there, just out of reach, like this.
The Iran nuclear power, the Iran, all of the great power that we thought existed, we blew it out to kingdom. We took advantage of it.
We blew it out to kingdom. Of course, what he wanted to say was, we blew it out to kingdom come. That is the phrase he grew up with. That is the phrase he has known most of his life. But that word combination is lost to his failing brain now. And there is also the possibility that his failing brain thinks that he actually did say kingdom come when he only said kingdom. Because that's the way brain failure works. And an obviously unhealthy 79-year-old man struggling and failing to make sense about anything. Generals flew across oceans, admirals crossed the world to come and listen.
Quantico, Virginia. In a spectacle that left America's top military brass stunned into silence, President Donald Trump delivered a 71-minute address on September 30th at the Marine Corps Base Quantico that veered from petty grievances to hallucinatory boasts, exposing what critics are calling a profound crisis of presidential fitness. The event, ostensibly a policy briefing led by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, summoned generals and admirals from global commands, disrupting operations from the Pacific Fleet to European theaters, for what sources describe as a setup to showcase Trump's unfiltered worldview. What followed was not strategy, but a torrent of lies, non-sequiturs, and threats that commanders later confided left them questioning the nuclear-armed leader's grip on reality. The speech began with Hegseth's awkward opener, berating officers for fat generals and admirals in the Pentagon, a jab at physiques the secretary deemed a bad look. Hegseth, confirmed only after pledging sobriety amid reports of alcohol issues, demanded uniforms buttoned and weights shed, drawing uneasy glances from an audience of elite warriors who could button their jackets with ease. Trump's entrance amplified the absurdity. His face a garish orange confection, as if slathered in homemade bronzer to mask 79 years of wear. Observers noted his weary slouch, mid-sentence pauses verging on collapse, and a voice drained of vigor, prompting whispers among aides about the 3 years remaining in his term. Trump wasted no time crossing sacred lines. Presidents revere the military's apolitical ethos. Trump shattered it. "I've never walked into a room so silent before," he whined, demanding applause on cue. "If you don't like what I'm saying, you can leave the room because there goes your rank. There goes your future." The threat hung like tear gas, met with frozen stares from West Point and Annapolis graduates who had bled for the flag. Trump rambled on staircases, obsessing over Biden's stumbles while boasting his own slow descents to avoid popping down, and escalators, hallucinating a UN sabotage plot, later debunked as his videographer's error. "We blew it out to kingdom," he mangled, groping for kingdom come in a brain fog moment that evoked Reagan.